This is week 2, first session on using sources with integrity, avoiding unintentional plagiarism. So it's really important to do a little bit of work on this and recognizing exactly what unintentional plagiarism is and how you can avoid it, particularly at the start of the trimester. We're week 3 now with 12 to go, and you want to get a handle on it before you have to start handing work in. Okay. And although it's being recorded, I will still be making comment on phrases and questions which appear in the chat. So this is the current climate. The current climate as we see it may differ from even a couple of years ago. So writing coursework as an international student can be a challenge. It's actually a challenge for all students. It can be a challenge for all students. But particularly for international students who have to deal with another language, if English isn't the first language, can deal with a different academic structure, a different way of learning, a different way of teaching, being away from what can be deemed as your home country. There's much complex academic vocabulary to deal with and confusing words to translate. Not all words can be translated, some are translated in a different way. You see the word plagiarism everywhere and why it's so important to avoid it. So people talk about plagiarism, avoid it, and yet it's the tools you need to be able to do it and not to plagiarize, rather than being told not to plagiarize. However, and anytime you want to ask a question, just put it in the chat. However, it's difficult to convey complex thoughts and ideas that are usually required in an academic essay. So some of the thoughts and ideas you're putting forward that you're citing from another author can sometimes be complex. Particularly if you're doing it in another language, it can often be tricky to be able to convey those ideas as best as possible. And often it's hard to know how best to integrate the sources. Okay, sometimes it can be difficult to know the best way to incorporate them. It doesn't come, it's not an easy subject, it's not easy for everybody. So I thought I would include a list of the terminology because it's very easy to assume that everybody knows exactly what everything means, and I shouldn't make assumptions. So the citations, the act of referring to another source in your own writing, it supports a point in your own work. That's what a citation is. So to cite is the verb. So to cite. To cite is the verb. So a reference list. A list of all the sources you referred to in your assignment. So tell me, when you're doing an assignment or a report or a research project or your dissertation, whereabouts in the whole package does the reference list come? Yep, it comes on the last page. So it comes on a page on its own entitled reference list. And the reference list should be in alphabetical order of the author's name, the second name. The second name is the family name. So for example, my name is Melanie Grey. Okay, my name is Melanie Grey. So Grey is my second name and it's my family name. So it comes in alphabetical order of your family name. Okay, with 1.5 line spacing. So that's a list of all the sources you referred to within the body of your assignment. The bibliography is a list of all the sources you've consulted, but not referred to. So for example, you may have heard a podcast on environmental management, on some aspect of it, an interesting podcast or a radio program or TV program, and taken in as background knowledge. However, you would have referred to it in your assignment. So that's a bibliography. Quoting is words directly lifted from a source. So quoting is the exact words, and a quote is encased or enclosed rather in inverted commas, in apostrophes, in speech marks, and I put the example up there. To paraphrase is to quote ideas indirectly by expressing them in other words. Now we'll go on to hear about how to paraphrase. So paraphrasing is getting an idea or a sentence or a phrase and putting it into your own words. You still have to reference, you still have to acknowledge the author in when you paraphrase. To summarize, using your own words to create a broad overview of an original piece of work. So original piece of work can be like a page of an article or something, or a good chunk of the article you want to summarize. Could be shorter than that, could be a long paragraph or a paragraph, not just a simple. So it's just basically the summary of that. So within the summary, you still need to acknowledge the author or the authors. Okay, any questions on that? Any questions on that? No. I mean, some of this you may not be, because you've already been through 4 years, 3 or 4 years. So a lot of this should not be new. However, it's how to do it is a new thing. In a coursework, you'll be discussing different ideas and analyses. Some your own, but others taken from readings and articles. Plagiarism means taking words without giving due credit to the author. In academic work, ideas and words are the private property of those who wrote them. Credit needs to be given to the authors. Be proud of demonstrating your own work. Okay, so what you're not doing is you're not simply incorporating lots of ideas from different people without any voice of your own. So that comes across as a voice. You will have your own point that you're demonstrating, which may be the discussion point in the coursework you've been given or the report. So you have your own voice that's being put forward. However, your voice will be supplemented and supported and made stronger by other authors in your field. So be proud and be confident about the type of work that you're producing, because in a few years' time, people will be citing your work, hopefully. These are the different forms of plagiarism. So it's often in recent years that students are often unaware, and it's very easy to do something and be unaware that that's actually what constitutes plagiarism. And the first one is failing to paraphrase properly. So the direct copying of someone else's work without attribution, meaning giving them the credit, and without use of quotation marks. This includes swapping synonyms while maintaining the same structure. So if you have a sentence, and if you put it into Google Translate, which I'm sure you don't, but if you did put it into Google Translate, or just picked out a few words and find the synonyms words, that's still deemed as plagiarism. Okay, so just changing the words isn't enough. So you need to be looking at that sentence or the phrase, turning away, and in your head expressing it in a completely different way, and then putting that down. Okay, let me see. I have to put my glasses on for this. My experience in the field led me to write a few of my own words, but I use some technical terms. Okay, we'll move on to this bit. That was a really good point. Some technical terms and scientific names. If they're technical terms and phrases which are commonly known in your field, you don't have to use a citation. For example, in my field, I may use terms and phrases which are common knowledge to everybody within my field of education or in learning development, but it's not known for people outside it. So therefore, I don't have to put in a citation. But if it's something brand new in your field, then you would have to use it. Like, you maybe give me an example later. So self-plagiarism, resubmission of the same work. Now this includes if you did something in first year or your undergraduate, you submitted a piece of work. Submitting that same piece of work, or B, weaking a paragraph out of it and putting it into your current work, is also plagiarism, self-plagiarism. Okay, so everything that you do must be brand new. Collusion, working together, your classmates in the same piece of work. So that we've seen a little bit of an increase in this. And to be fair, it's been during COVID when everybody was online, and I know people created teams. You know, you had your own study groups. particularly during, you know, if you were given a fixed length of time to do an assignment, people form study groups, and it's very easy to just think, oh, that's all right, it's the same, we're in the same group. But unfortunately, you have to write your own piece. Don't borrow any else's pieces. If you have friends or members of the family who are at university somewhere else, it's also not good practice to do that either, because we get notifications through Turnitin of somebody who's used a work of a student here, and it requires investigation. So save yourself the heartache. Okay, patchwork plagiarism, stringing together quotations from different authors to make an argument. So patchwork plagiarism. So you have an article, you then get together quotations from different parts of from different authors within that article, and you put them together and use a few joining words to make an argument. Okay, so that's also patchwork. So you're just patching people together without making enough of a point of your own. Contract buying now, I think UK essays or whatever, I don't think they're allowed to run anymore. So avoid the temptation of buying a pre-written assignment from an essay writing service or having somebody else write it for you. And also the last one, incomplete understanding of the source material. If you don't understand it, don't try to use it. So often these articles can be quite heavy. They can be quite complex, and depending on the subject area, they can be putting forward complex ideas which can be very challenging. If there's any aspects of it, don't use it. Because if you don't understand the work that's there to begin with, you're going to find it quite challenging to use that same work in your assignments. If you don't understand it, or you don't really follow it, or you don't really follow the argument, choose another one. Find something else written by another author. Okay, so those are the forms of plagiarism. So this is what you put in the chat there just now. What is common knowledge? So often it's difficult to know what to reference or what to acknowledge and what not to. So you don't have to reference common knowledge. However, what is considered common knowledge? Information that most people know. That the earth is round. What sunrise and sunset is. Generally observable facts. Most people use mobile phones. So something that's become so common now that it's generally observable. Like in the UK, we talk about, you've probably heard nothing but it, the cost of living crisis or the increase in energy. Okay, so that's at the moment, it's common knowledge. If you were going to go into any more specifically, you would have to quote something. Information is known, there should be an N there, by a common group such as names and national events. So when you talk about Christmas, when you talk about Ramadan, when you talk about any other national events that are in our calendar, then you don't have to reference it. So within your fields of environmental management, of IT, cybersecurity, there'll be information there which is common knowledge to people working in that field, but not to people outside, in which case, depending who's reading it, you don't have to reference it. Always ask yourself who your audience is and what do you assume the readers know. If you are putting out for a common publication that everybody was to read it, you may want to explain it, or you may want to add your citation in. Okay, and then how do you know what's not your idea? So the best thing to do is to ask yourself, could anyone know this? Or are you making a groundbreaking claim? If it's the former, you're good to know. However, it's the latter, essentially your idea hasn't already been proposed. So after a lot of study, it can be easy for all your readings to blur into one, but a simple Control F. So you go to an article using it in words, so Control F, and it'll bring up search words. So if you do Control F, it'll bring up search terms. You can find out other things that have already been written on this subject matter. So can you put in the chat here which one of these do you have most challenges with? Paraphrasing, summarizing, or referencing correctly? Which one of these do you find most challenging? Paraphrasing. Okay, summarizing. Yeah. And I think quite often it takes it takes practice, B, it takes a bit of confidence. Yeah, paraphrasing. Practice and confidence to be able to read through something and be able to interpret it and express it in your own way. However, summarizing is probably a little bit easier than paraphrasing it. Yeah. So paraphrase, summarize, reference correctly. You're expected to show you've read the relevant sources and the subject citations. However, you need to explain these ideas in your own words and arrive at your own conclusions. So don't just copy. In your writing, describe other people's ideas or results using references and their importance to your argument rather than simply copying what you've read. But you know that. So we'll move on to the next bit. And I've also written some things on a Padlet, which I will bring up. And I think I've actually got 2 seconds. I've got an example here. Yeah. So what I'm going to do now, and if I disappear from the screen, I'll be back. It's because it doesn't like me opening up a Padlet and another screen. So give me 2 seconds. So I'm going to bring up the link to Padlet and put it in the chat. Okay, I'm back now. It's very annoying. It just disappears. Okay, so I put the link to a Padlet there. So I want you to please click on the link. Okay. And there's some useful sources here. So under academic articles, so Padlet's an interactive storyboard. Under academic articles, click any one that you want. Click on the first one. Okay, so you can go anywhere into. I just want to show you that as an example. So paraphrasing involves 4 changes. The word you use, for example, nouns, adjectives, verbs. The structure and syntax, such as from the passive construction to an active construction. The elements of the original text, you pick only the applicable text. Presentation of other people's ideas in your own words, which requires a citation. Okay, so have a look at a sentence, any sentence, and then see if you can turn away and put it, it could be any sentence, see if you can turn away and think of it in your own idea, in your own terminology. So I'll see if I can, so. I want to go up to the start. Sometimes the shorter sentences can be a little bit more difficult. So for example, if you look at under introduction, I hope you're all seeing it, that the first article, environmental management, if you look under introduction, you go to the sentence which begins nevertheless. That's a reasonably easy one to be able to paraphrase. Nevertheless. So you would read that sentence and then you would just think about what it says and then you put it into your own words and then you reference the author. Okay, so that's paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is just taking a small thing and putting it into your own words. Okay, so the best thing to do is to read, reread it, absorb, set it aside and write from memory. So read the sentence and actually get the whole meaning of it, because it's very easy to read something without actually taking in what it means. So it's good to read something and then look away and think, what actually does this mean? So you express it in a different fashion, using different tenses, using different words. Express it as you see it. Okay, because this point you're making is adding something to support your case, as it were. So I think, as I mentioned before, be careful you don't simply take sentences, take sentences from the abstract or the introduction of an article or a piece, change the meanings and then stitch them together. So that's like patchwork paraphrasing. Okay, so be careful you don't do that. It's important just to look at sentences or look at aspects of the work that's important, that's going to add something. Look away, rephrase it in your head, come back and then write it down with the attribution to the respective author. The big do's and don'ts. Don't mind the sources for sentences you like, then paraphrase and stitch them together. That's just what I've said. Don't simply take sentences from the abstract or first paragraph. Do consider the purpose and impact of your work. What is your work going to be saying? What do you want your work to say? Read the passage several times to understand the meaning. Turn away and note down the key ideas. Write your version of the text without looking at the original. Compare it with the original passage. Make minor adjustments. Don't patchwork it. Substituting synonyms for some of the author's original works does not display the author's argument. An acceptable paraphrase must alter the structure of the author's writing. So you want to be changing the structure. So if you did it that way, it would probably take you less time than trying to work out how to use synonyms, because they don't. Using a synonym may not give the correct meaning. Okay, little bit of practice. Like drought, so read this. Like drought, excess rainfall and flooding can also contribute to epidemics of waterborne infectious diseases, in this case due to poor sanitation resulting from runoff from overwhelmed sewage lines or the contamination of water by livestock. That's actually quite a long sentence, and that's a reference underneath it. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes. So see either in your head or you can practice writing it down whether you'll be able to paraphrase that. Sometimes it's not easy because of specific words like sanitation and waterborne epidemics. So I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay. There's the original. Acceptable paraphrase 1. The use of synonyms, and the next one was change of sentence structure. So I would think it most probably it's quite good to change the sentence structure, and often you can go the other way. So you can go to the end of the sentence, and if it's applicable, you can write it the other way around. Can be started like this. Waterborne diseases can also spread because of excess. Yes, except you would be careful not to use the word excess rainfall and flooding. Yeah, no, because you're using the same words. But you've got the right meaning there. Waterborne diseases, you can't use any of the same words, although they have said rainfall in that one. So sometimes you have to be careful, which is why it's easier sometimes to be able to, rather than looking at the passage, by turning away and seeing whether you could you could say levels of rain, whether you can work it out in your own head rather than having to look at it and change it. However, practice will get you there. Okay, so to reference correctly, it's necessary academic practice. So which of the sources you've used in your work and acknowledge the authors. So use in-text citations, the correct reference system. So you will normally be using Harvard referencing. However, check with you doing engineering or any kind of computing work, you need to check with your course leader or your lecturer what type of referencing you'll be using. The correct use of quotations, the correct use of the correct layout of references. Now I'm going to click on this, but it's not going to, it won't come up because we're through Collaborate Ultra. But if you go to GCU Library in the Discover bar, you type in Cite Them Right. That is the big help to the referencing system. Okay, so that will show you how to reference web articles, it will show you how to reference books, it will show you how to reference tweets, it will show you how to reference diagrams, all these things in Harvard referencing, and it will show you how to do the reference list at the end. So Cite Them Right is fantastic. It's a resource within the GCU library. So you could make that a favourite. Common errors, using words without quotations or incorrect citation or multiple referencing systems. So quite often people just use the one. So I'll set it the chat there. So they use one. I mean, it's really easy to forget it, which is where you have to go through your work with a, as we say, a fine tooth comb. Okay, so make sure you have both of them there. Incorrectly citing somebody, but it's either the wrong author or put the first name down to instead of the second name, or using different types of referencing systems. Now this is a useful slide. So this is slide 16. I would imagine, so there are two ways of inserting in-text citations. I would imagine that it's the information prominent one, which is the way that most people do it. However, it's good to vary the way that you do it because it gives your work a bit more credibility. So identify within the sentence, author prominent. You have the surname there, brackets the date, argues the popularity of this SUV. The second one, Devlin explains the benefits. Okay, so you have the author's name, you then have the brackets for the publication date. Okay, so that's author prominent. So try and remember that. If it's author prominent, it's the author is outside of the quotation, outside of the brackets. Most people do the second one, which is fine, but it's good to vary the way that you do it, because otherwise all you're kind of doing is stringing summaries together. So you can see that there is a quotation there, and 37 there is the page number. If it's applicable on a piece of text, if it's not necessary, then you don't need to put it in. And then it's there, Devlin. Okay, so that the author and the date of publication of the article or the book is all enclosed within the brackets. So that's the two of them. Author prominent, information prominent. And then there's a reference for Smith at the end. Smith, M, blah, blah, blah. Power and Estate, Basingstoke is the publisher, is the place. Palgrave Macmillan is the publisher. Power and Estate will be the book, and 2009 is the publication. Okay, any questions on that? So now that you see it, author prominent, information prominent, they're two really good ways, and it's good to vary them. Because authors have different viewpoints, and each author is offering something different within your work. So it's really good to be able to vary the way that you present the authors in your work. Use of quotations. When you're citing two or more authors for the same point, what order are they in? Alphabetical. It's alphabetical. So when you go into cite them right, you'll be able to see that. And there's also, you'll be able to look up secondary referencing. Now, I think I've taken secondary referencing out of this because it's kind of too much to be doing. Secondary. Secondary referencing. Sorry, I put an M there instead of an N. Secondary referencing is you cite another author within his work, or one author cites another one. But you need to be a little bit careful with secondary referencing, because and if you look in that article, you might see examples of it. You want to try and get to the source text as much as possible. You want to avoid saying something like such and such thing cited in something else. You want to try and get as far as possible to the original author. Example, direct quote with brief citation, Harvard style. Wenger, 1998, page 181, argues that, and that's the quotation. Okay, so at the end of that, you would have Wenger with his full reference. When you're putting in quotations, make sure that your quotation actually adds something to what you're saying. You're not just pulling them out of journals for the sake of it. It's got to really be important. It's got to add some value to your work. So avoid overuse of them, and you wouldn't quote a whole paragraph. So words of the source should be summarized unless there's good reason for quoting. So when you quote something, there's got to be a really good reason for it. It's got to add something really substantial, a point that you're making. What does a quote add to your work? The author's voice should be labeled every few sentences. Remind the author who is speaking. So what do I mean by labeled every few sentences? The author's voice. What do I mean labeled every few sentences? Yes. So if you want to look back at one of the articles that I posted up on the Padlet, you will see that throughout the paragraphs, there's a citation. So every couple of sentences, somebody is cited. Okay, so that's what I mean by making sure that that the author's voice is labeled every few sentences, because you have to remind the reader who's speaking. Okay, if there's nothing there, it can only be assumed that it's you that's putting that forward. Okay, so it needs to be reminded every few sentences. So a paragraph should contain the author as well as the writer's voice. When I say voice, I mean the writing. So you'll be putting forward presenting your thoughts on your research, and that'll be backed up by the author's voice. So the argument or point should be presented in the writer's voice and supported by reference to an author. So if you look at the Padlet again, okay, and the first paragraph in the Padlet, I've labeled it integrating voices into your work. Okay, so that'll give you more examples of how to integrate other authors' voices in your work. When to use the page number. If you're referencing paraphrase information, the page number is not always needed. Depends on whether you wish to direct your reader to a specific section. So I've just given a Lord of the Rings example there. When explaining the history of the ring to Frodo, Gandalf touches on themes of fate and having a preordained purpose. So that takes it to page 20. So when it's something specific, when you're paraphrasing or summarizing something, unless it's very specific on a specific part of a longer article, a longer journal, it's not really necessary. So it's not, you don't have to do that in every situation. A few ways to reference your work. Academics created different styles to best suit the subject. So important to find out which format your work requires. GCU Harvard referencing is the most common system. But if you click on that link, and I can send you the PowerPoint afterwards. Any quotes you include? Paraphrasing of ideas, a mention of another thinker, anything is not your original thought. If someone draws an original conclusion from a common fact, you must cite the source, all tables, diagrams, and illustrations. Okay, so I'm hoping that, well, I would imagine that if you've already been through your studies, you've been through a degree already, you will have worked out your own system. So everybody has their own system and their own way of organising. Some people learn through heartache. Some people don't save. So I remember years ago when I did a large project, I forgot completely, I didn't save it and there was no cloud thing. So I completely lost it all and I had to sit up, I think, till 6 o'clock in the morning, rewriting it from scrappy notes. So sometimes you think of a great idea, you think, oh, remember that, you put it down and then you lose it. So make a note of significant page numbers, authors, titles, and years of publication. So does anybody use what's called RefWorks within GCU? Does anybody use RefWorks? Okay, good. I'll put a quick link up there for anybody who doesn't. I think it's great. RefWorks saves. You want to be saving yourself work. And I won't take you through it just now because we don't have time. But if you click on the link, essentially, basically, RefWorks is a software that works with the GCU library. So you go into the GCU library, you find your article, you decide you want to use that article. RefWorks automatically creates the reference for you. It also creates the in-text citation. So you click on it and you sign in. You create an account. So every article that you look through the library and you can save it to RefWorks and it does the reference for you. However, you always have to make sure that it's correct and according to Harvard referencing, because it won't give you things like date accessed. But it's a great resource. So it's crucial you actually reference where quotes come from, because if it is a good quote, the reader may want to investigate it. So you need to be the author's name and the date of publication, go right back down to the end, and then your reader or the audience will want to know exactly where that quote comes from. Okay, so you'll all be under pressure, if not now, but over the year, because you only have a year to get your work done. Anticipate pressure, especially at midterm and right before the end of the semester when coursework can pile up. So it's fine just now, so you're just getting used to the way of things working, get yourself registered, get your modules organised, know what coursework you're doing, done your reading. You might have accommodation stuff sorted out or not sorted out yet. So it's important to work out a system of the way you're going to work. Make friends with the library, don't isolate yourselves. Ask for help from your lecturer, make an appointment with your academic advisor, seek support from subject specialist librarians and from the LDC, so that's us, and manage your time effectively. Actually, that slide should have come a bit before. Give yourself time to research, paraphrase, in-text citations, references, check for plagiarism and authenticate sources. So just before, I probably will finish the recording now. So thanks everybody, and then I'll continue with another short piece of information.